that number, Oliver?
Right, it should be live in a few seconds.
Right. Fantastic. So
We're not live yet.
It says we are live on Zoom, by the way.
Brilliant.
Facebook.
We've just gone live now.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the live LUF Lounge. Sorry we're a little bit late, but it won't be the Lancashire User Forum if everything ran as smooth, tickety-boo. It just wouldn't be as edgy, and we wouldn't have to be as flexible if it was that organised, because truth of the matter, we're not. We kind of shoot from the hip. Welcome to tonight's LUF Lounge. Beside me is the beautiful Emma Daggers, the speaker, teacher, preacher, and all-round seeker.
Wow. And next to me is Peter Yarwood, our very own leader. And I just think that it's important that we remember what the Lancashire User Forum is about. It is about anyone affected by substance misuse, or the using community or recovery community, anyone else interested in substance misuse and community. And we are now on a digital platform, so keeping it as real and authentic as we had it when we were actually interconnected with people. It's proven to be tricky, but we did it. It was really brave and stepped right out there 3 weeks ago, and we've managed again to get a great audience with a variety of expertise. And I think we should just go.
Well, the day, this is our third week. The theme is legacy.
Which is one of our values.
What's the legacy COVID-19 has left us with? The first week, we had around about 100, 110 viewers live in asking questions. We had about 6,000 views, and we reached 12,000 people. Week 2, we had about 150 people tune in live with 6,800 views and a reach of 18,000 people. So thank you everyone who's sharing it. It's in line with the vision and values of the forum. It's for anybody and everybody who's interested or affected by substance misuse. And we're doing it now on a live digital platform. So we've got a great lineup of guests to engage in a stimulating debate.
And I do want to say, smile, guys. You all look really serious.
You're allowed to smile.
Relax, man.
We're nervous.
I know I am. We're just on our own, aren't we? So I'll keep getting messages coming now. This is not going to happen without you guys out there. So you guys need to be liking, sharing, asking the questions, because until we can get the themes from you guys out there, our community, which is vast and wide, then we're going to go off the values of the Lancashire User Forum, one of them being legacy, like Pete just said. So I do want to introduce our very own Wolski, and Paul is going to bring us in with Rock Down in the Lockdown, an amazing artist, an amazing guitarist. And Paul, do you just want to tell us a little bit about when you wrote this song?
Right, yeah, okay. So hello everyone, I'm Wolski. So I started writing this song when I was in treatment for, substance misuse, and it kind of got put on the back burner a little bit. So my journey was, I went through treatment, and then pretty much straight after I went into education. My life before that was about music. I was trying to get the deal, trying to get the record deal and all that, chasing the dream for a long time, and the dream turned into a nightmare, and ended up in the despair via the torture of debauchery. So this song is called Torture Debauchery, and the inspiration is basically the pain of addiction. Do you know what I mean? So started about 5 years ago, finished about 5 weeks ago. So here we go. Shall I just go for it?
Just do it and enjoy it, Paul.
Nice one. Thanks for having me. Torture Debauchery. Let's do it. Rat pong in the sewer line. Drip, drop, drip, I'll drop my mattress on the dry bit. I smell shit, taste sick, makes me wanna swear shit. Torture, debauchery, all in my head. Pigeon probing vermin in the sewer line. I killed Fernanda's rhubarb and custard pie, and dirty vermin, squirming that I am. I've got a hole in my shoe and a soggy sock, one sock. Filthy, it's murky, lurgy that I've got. It's a bugger, I'm a beggar, more often than not. I'm tanked up, wound up, I grit my teeth and grrr. I conjecture breakup with me and my girl. She says my feet smell. Rat pong in the sewer line. Drippity, droppity, drippity, drop. The mattress on the drive-in. I smell shit, taste sick, makes me wanna swear shit. Torture, debauchery, all in my head. Torture, debauchery, makes me wanna swear. Torture, debauchery, everywhere. Torture, debauchery, all in my hair and under my skin. You. Hey.
Unique, you're a legend.
Nice one. Cheers, Emma.
A
Does it
legend.
sound all right?
Yeah, it sounded good. We had a few tests today, didn't we? I'm a shouting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a few tests today and a few technical hitch.
We got there.
We got there in the end. We did. What did you go down to Edinburgh for?
Well, I ended up somehow getting accepted into Edinburgh University, which is a bit of a miracle in itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Expelled from high school and then years of addiction, and then somehow wound up in Edinburgh Uni. So I did a philosophy and a theology degree, and basically it taught me that I do not want to be a philosopher or a theologian.
Nice.
That's all I learned.
But what is it that you do want to do now?
I don't know. Part of me does want to one day go back into academia and maybe go down the psychology route. Not really to teach, more as a stepping stone to do a doctorate. But that's like way down the line. I've had enough, to be honest, of education. I was in there for 5 years and it was painful. It was hard work, especially being new into life without alcohol or substances. You know what I mean? So, but I did it, and I just need some time away. So I don't know. I've got the hunger back for the music. So I might go and chase that deal one last time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you might come and do some stuff with me, might you?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Listen, I'm right up for getting involved with the recovering community. You know, put some music workshops on, give out some guitar lessons and that, and definitely give back. You know, because yeah, recovery's give me this life basically. So I'd love to give a bit back. You know.
And you're a bit further on, aren't you? So there are some guys in St Anne's that I know we could get some up and running there.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. I'm 6 years clean.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
We've got a thing up and running already. It's just a matter of doing things a little bit differently. So thanks for that, Paul. You're welcome to stick around. And I just want to give a few shout outs to Leslie, to Danielle Ruddy. Danielle, you're welcome to get involved with us again.
Absolutely,
we love you.
We love you. We miss you.
Come back into the fold.
Yeah.
So Leighton, Richie, shout out to you guys. And I just want to say, as we introduce the speakers, you can ask questions. And we'll feed them in for you.
And if this is your only opportunity to ask these guys these questions, that I would take full advantage if you want to know what is going on and what's going to happen and where we are.
Right. So with that, let's get straight into the lineup. Our next speaker It's called Oliver Standing.
Hey,
Hello,
Oliver.
Oliver. Welcome to the Lancashire User Forum.
Thank you.
LUF Lounge.
Please stop shouting.
Thank you. Okay, shall I make a start?
Oh, and no
We
one's
keep sitting here shouting at the laptops.
But Oliver's on way in like down south. So my thinking is I have to shout so you can hear me, right?
Yeah, coming through loud and clear, Peter. Thank you. I know I always end up shouting as well. So yeah, I do live in London, but I am actually a Lancastrian.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, I don't have a strong accent, but I grew up in Bury. So yeah, 17 years in Bury, and then studies and stuff, and I ended up in London. So yeah, I'm a Red Rose person. Cool.
Oh.
Shall I jump into my bit and I thought I'd just keep it really brief and take loads of questions.
Yeah.
Tell us about
Please
tell us
Please
about where you're at now, because
Yeah.
things have changed, haven't they, this last year?
Yeah, they have. Yeah, thank you, Peter and Emma, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and being part of the Red Rose stuff. It's always been one of the most sort of active and innovative recovery communities that I've been aware of. Amazing intro there with the music from Paul. So Collective Voice is the National Alliance of Drug and Alcohol Treatment and Recovery Charities, basically. So some of the treatment charities came together to form a small organisation. So with Collective Voice, it's just a couple of us, it's just me and a policy officer. And some of those organisations coming together will be familiar to some people. So it includes CGL, Turning Point, Phoenix Futures, Changing Lives, who are based up in the Northeast, and others. And they came together to have a single organisation that could do work with politicians, could do work with media, could do work with commissioners like Chris, other people in the kind of public health world, to really like fly the flag for the power and the value of treatment and recovery, and make sure it's not overlooked in that kind of policy world and in that world of political decision making. Because we know that stigma exists and affects people all the time. We know it can stop people getting the help they need. So I'm talking to MPs, I'm talking to civil servants and people in other kind of campaigning charities. And I'm just getting that message across that we need in this country, you know, properly funded treatment and recovery services to help people, basically, because we know it can transform people's lives, and it's amazing.
So we've got some of the questions that are coming in.
Okay.
Already. So
Cool.
One of the questions is, how do we get to see everybody on the screen? And that's just easy. That our guide changes it from speaker view to gallery view, and that should then change the way everyone sees it. So that's one for Scott.
Yeah,
there.
Scott, can you change the view?
Scott, change the view so people can see everyone on the screen, if that's okay. And I think, you know, how has COVID-19 driven innovation in the system? That's one question for you, Oliver.
Thanks, Peter. It's had quite an amazing effect, to be honest. I mean, I do a lot of collaborative work anyway, because we are so small, it's just a couple of people, and because we're an alliance, we're kind of working across quite big spaces and bringing people together. But with such a threat of COVID, which has got this, you know, it's such a serious concern for everybody, but particularly for people who might already have some vulnerabilities. It's such a concern that it's really accelerated all that innovation and collaboration. So I think the main thing it's done is broken down a lot of boundaries. So I've been spending loads of time, as I'm sure others have, kind of on like Zoom calls and teleconferences and stuff like that. And like the providers are coming together, the different charities, but also the NHS providers, you know, loads of commissioners. I'm speaking to Chris every week, twice a week. We're sometimes on calls, and then calls with Public Health England, the Department of Health. It's really accelerated that partnership work. So people are just coming together quicker, making decisions quicker. People are being very very generous with their time and very generous with their goodwill and very generous with their resources. You know, I've had people, they're writing sort of guidance and toolkits on how to deal with some of the challenges posed by COVID. And they're just sharing them with me saying, you know, you can give these out to anyone who wants them. We don't care. We've developed them. You can just share them. So, I mean, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I think it's brought out the best in people. Maybe in some cases the worst as well. You'll always get a few people doing bad stuff. But I think for 90% of people, it really has brought out the best, whether that's community volunteers who are going to be taking, you know, medicines and food to vulnerable people, or recovery communities, or kind of people in government.
So we've got another question coming through from Tony Lee. So it's our very own Tony Lee. And he wants to know, what challenges have you faced with the pharmacies? Because on week one, Prum came on and he was talking about personal responsibility and how COVID-19 has brought about that innovation and the change, I suppose, to from daily prescribing to sometimes weekly or fortnightly. And what we've picked up off a lot of the service managers, particularly locally, is that people are taking personal responsibility. So there's a quote from Goethe: treat a man as you find him and you make him worse, but treat him as if he already were the best he could be, and he'd become the best he could be. And that's we're finding that's happening.
I was what I was saying about on the first week of lockdown, my initial first was fear. Like, oh my God, what about the guys? They're all going to sell the scripts. They're all go. But you know what? There's been, you know, don't underestimate the guys. You know, they're looking after the scripts. They're using it as and when they should, because they're not going to run out. They don't want to run out. You know, there's a certain few that I think once the fortnight's up, the learning will happen then, because they don't want to be rough for that long. So, you know, the next week will be the one that tells the time.
So challenges in the pharmacies, Tony wants.
Yeah, I'll just echo what you say. I mean, therapists talk about teachable moments. So when we experience trauma, or we experience, you know, people use the phrase rock bottom or whatever it is, it's a teachable moment. So although we have experienced some kind of trauma or massive challenge, we actually absorb the learning much more profoundly than we would otherwise. And I kind of think that COVID for the system, it might be a teachable moment, because we can understand what we're all capable of as individuals, but also as communities, also as systems. And like you were saying, this, you know, clinical decision about moving away from daily supervised consumption, people getting 2 weeks of meds, that's been forced by circumstance. Yet you're seeing people who it's affecting in their, you know, real life. It's a sort of stimulus for positive change, because they're taking that personal responsibility, like you were saying, Emma. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the community pharmacies, you've kind of alluded to it. They play a really important role in our world, don't they? In drug and alcohol treatment, we know that. They are affected like everybody else by staff being ill at home, staff self-isolating because they've got an issue in the household. So the overall capacity of the community pharmacies is reducing. And that in some areas they've been unable to provide daily supervised consumption of OST meds. So, you know, the providers and CGL have put their sort of statement on their website, so it's in the public domain. You know, anyone can look at that. But I think it's fair to say other providers as well are moving towards, like you say, you know, weekly or fortnightly, you know, take-home doses. So that would be one of the big challenges. The others probably around needle and syringe provision, so kind of you know, needle exchange services. A lot of that is provided through the community pharmacy network. So if we're seeing that impacted, which I believe we are, I mean, Chris might be able to talk about it later, that's a worry in terms of that vital frontline harm reduction services, you know, which we need for the people we work with, right?
And this is where peer-to-peer stuff comes in as well.
Absolutely. So I think the most innovative services are moving towards that peer model, where they're giving people, you know, a bag of stuff, and it's the same in the naloxone, isn't it? If we can get the supplies to people who are peer, you know, obviously they've got access to their peers and they've got a passion for doing what they do because they've lived it, then these are like the hidden assets we need to be activating and working with to get supplies out to people who really need it.
Yeah, yeah. What's your take on the pharmacies dispensing methadone?
Well, one of the sorry
Just
to,
one of the
to butt in,
questions.
one of the guys has just said, Emma, you bang on. So some of the conversations and dialogue, what's happened behind the scenes. So people have been given that responsibility. They've had 2 weeks, but they've started to cut down. So Paul's saying he's now got 3 weeks supply because he's saved a little bit.
Yeah. I actually spoke to Paul the other day. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul. And said, there's no rush, man. There's no rush. You know, it's just about being comfortable right
so we've
now.
got 100 people viewing us, Oliver. And if half of those share this, we'll get the message out further. So share it, guys. And big shout out to Leslie Butter and Barry Floyd who've just joined us. So Oliver, can I just ask you then, because last week we got into it a little bit around people who was in emergency accommodation and how the system was flexing to provide support for those people's needs.
Yeah, I think that's a really important topic, Peter. We've seen, you know, there was a lot of political pressure. Basically, I think you've got to sort of look at it a bit through a political lens. We know that there's lots of people sleeping rough in this country, which is, you know, morally catastrophic. You know, it shouldn't be happening, but it is happening. And we know that quite a few of those people sleeping rough have drug and alcohol issues. So when COVID was starting to really kick in, there was a kind of political drive to get people who were sleeping rough into accommodation, so people could self-isolate, so those kind of public health harms posed by COVID could be avoided. So it sort of happened first, I think, in London, but it's also happened a lot in the Greater Manchester Combined Authority footprint. So in sort of 48 hours, just a couple of days, there was all the organisations coming together and people were moved en masse into hotels, often like your travel lodges, Premier Inns, you know, which is great. And the first thing to say is that I think that is a good thing. But of course, there's a lot of issues over how we can get effective support to people who are in those hotels, right? So some of those people have support needs around drug use, some around alcohol use, some around kind of acute health needs and other stuff. They're quite hard environments because you know they're quite lively, obviously, and you've got clinicians kind of running up and down. They can't get more than within 2 meters of anyone, obviously, because none of us could do that unless you know members of the same household. So you've got people sort of delivering rapid harm reduction interventions, sort of shouting through the doorway to people who are in their rooms. And you know, generally it's been an amazing effort to make that happen. Obviously, I think it has been a bit chaotic just because it's been so quick. And I'm pleased that in London just a few days ago there was a service which is SLAM, South London and Maudsley, which is an NHS mental health trust, with CGL and Turning Point, 2 charity providers. They're working together hand in glove to do a 24-hour, you know, flexible service to meet the needs of people with drug and alcohol problems in all those hotels right across London. So I mean, it's a big area, and like I say, that's happening in the Greater Manchester Combined Authority as well. So what I'm trying to do is work with all those partners to capture some of the learning, you know, what actually worked well, what didn't work well, so that can be shared with other areas around the country, because it will happen. And it'll happen, you know, partly it's driven by the spread of COVID-19 itself. So there's just more of the virus in the south of England at the moment for whatever reason. There's a lot in London. There's some hotspots like Sheffield and other places, but generally it's sort of moving through to the north. So like community treatment providers in the south have been much more heavily hit so far. Some of them have got half the staff at home, you know, self-isolating. It's less in the north. But you know, it's likely that will change as the virus itself kind of moves up the country a little bit. So we want to share that learning.
I just want to just quickly shout out while we're on it, and I don't forget, shout out to the CGL staff in Lancashire in the Inspire sites, because I know they are going above and beyond, getting the script sorted, they're coming back, there's restarts, you know, the dogs drank it. they really are going above and beyond. So
The whole of the Inspire
the
partnership.
whole of, you know, the
doing a
really
boss job.
massive shout out to them.
You know, we've got Julie Kiss, who's watching all the way in New York. Hello,
Hey,
Julie. And she's saying, you know, it's really sad over in New York with COVID-19. And I think what we've got is probably a flagship that can be replicated around the world, because, you know, the theme for this is like legacy.
Yeah.
What's the legacy COVID-19
Yeah.
has left us with? And it seems to be driving some really positive innovation.
And lucky enough, we've spent years building relationships, because our heart is in this. Is vocational work, isn't it? It's purpose-driven work. It's
Absolutely.
like we get out of bed in the morning to make a difference. So
Can I
we've
just
had
throw them out there? Oliver, I don't know if I was reading correctly, but I was reading something on your page about the assessment that you've got online assessments going on as well towards people that are vulnerable in a category of people smoking drugs and, you know, with breathing problems, because that's where it seems to be hitting us with the breathing problems and what have you. And I'm more aware that, you know, that's a big percentage of the service users at the end of the day. So you're saying there's an online service that they can have an assessment as into getting more treatment towards obviously being vulnerable in their positions at this moment in time. And you know, how have you managed to get that out there at the end of the day? Because for me, if I'm being honest, you know, I had an inability to take any action at all when I were in addiction at the end of the day. So, you know, how have you managed and gone about that?
So yeah, that was an example of one of the charities that we work with. I think, to be honest, they brought that in partly out of necessity, because they had a lot of staff who were saying, we're ill, or someone in my household is ill. I've got to sit at home, basically. So they wanted to use those staff who were at home to be contributing to the work of the service. So they kind of some of that initial assessment work. So if someone walked in off the street, says, I want some help, that initial assessment that they'd get, they moved that bit onto the phone line. And I'm not saying that is as good as sitting down in a room face to face with someone, because I don't think it is. But I think it can be really good if it's a skilled person doing it, and a lot of the workers are really skilled. So it was maybe that initial bit rather than sort of in-depth therapeutic work. And ideally, that person would then be able to go into a service to see someone face to face, if there's people in there to run the service. So it's a bit of a mixture. I totally take your point. I don't think it can ever replace, face-to-face work with a key worker or with peers or recovery community or a therapeutic group. I don't think it can replace that, but I think it can complement it.
Just on the prescription side of it as well. Sorry about this. I just seem to be balancing a bit, but I try to come in earlier and I get really anxious as well, just the same as everybody else on screen. I think I'm reading up again somewhere else. Really good at reading, just not good at getting questions out sometimes. But that instead of repeat prescriptions, that they're automatically going to be on site at the chemists, rather than having to go through all this process again. Maybe people, like you say, having problems in getting in touch with services and everything else. I mean, is that ongoing with the blue prescriptions, as we call, obviously your methadone and your Suboxone and everything else. Subutex.
There's definitely a suggestion of a relaxation around the rules that community pharmacies have to follow. I don't actually know the exact detail of it. Chris might know, but there's a suggestion that, we're in a state of emergency, basically. We're in a national crisis, and there's a suggestion that pharmacies can have a bit more power to use their own professional, they're highly trained people, to use their professional discretion, so that if someone's prescription has come to an end, but they're in they've been using a medicine for a long time, the pharmacist themselves can issue the next installment of that medicine, rather than that person needing to get a new prescription.
Just on that as well, I think that the pharmacists are doing a great job as well. I've been out and experienced it myself too, with a 2 metre distance, letting people in, sometimes only one person allowed in a chemist at a time, depending how big it is. They're pumping a lot of methadone, and they're doing a great job as well. So I think Chris can answer some of them, expand on some of them questions as well.
Glenn had it.
Glenn, yeah.
You had your hand up.
Yeah, hey Elva, you all right? Last week,
Hey.
government released some guidelines around people that was vulnerable, and the drug and alcohol community don't fall under that bracket. I'm just wondering what your take is on that, and what classes as vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Glenn. We kind of discussed this, you know, with partner organisations ourselves. You know, my suspicion is that quite a high proportion of people with serious drug or alcohol issues would actually fall into that category, kind of due to some of their underlying health issues that they might have. So Scott mentioned about you know, breathing issues. So one of the medical conditions that would take someone into that vulnerable category would be COPD, and we know that in populations of people who've got, you know, drug and alcohol issues, levels of COPD are pretty high, and we also know they're routinely underdiagnosed. So there's actually more people than have a formal diagnosis. So you're right. You know, if you're in drug and alcohol treatment, that won't automatically qualify anyone to be in that vulnerable category. But I think a relatively high degree of our people would be in it. So if, you know, if someone feels that they are, I'd advise them talk to the treatment provider. There's a website where you can actually register for yourself or for someone else on the gov.uk website as a vulnerable person.
I mean, do you not find that as like being a bit diverse as well?
Scott, you're just jumping in there. Andy Toynton had his hand up next.
Andy, have you got a question?
It's just a point that was made then in relation to COPD, and I had a personal experience this week with my mum that's she's got COPD. She's had an amputation recently, and I've struggled to get her. She'd never got a letter off the GP. Now, the reason why I mention it is because there is a backlog, or there's a glitch in the system somewhere. So I was backwards and forwards all week with the government and with the doctors, and it's something to do with a code that's not being released. So there's quite a few people out there at the moment that wouldn't have had a letter but are entitled. So what I would advise is, if you are vulnerable, if you do have COPD, you've not had a letter, then ring up your GP, and I think what they can do it from their end. And I just wanted to mention that because there's quite a few people out there still.
Okay, yeah, great point.
Scott, was you
Yeah, so, and again, you know, recognising your vulnerability and the diverse, it's like what Glenn said, you know, we don't fall under that category at the end of the day. And I know that's where I got my COPD from. So there's a lot of people that's not recognised with like these kind of breathing issues and everything else. And, you know, for me, it's evident, you know, that's where most of us get us, you know, his issues from his taking drugs and everything else. I just find it difficult how they don't fall under, you know, a vulnerable kind of category at the end of the day. And like, you know, we're being pushed to one side as to concentrating on, you know, the general public, which is great, which is fine, you know, and I get all that. But again, it's like we're getting pushed at curb again. You know what I'm saying? Like we're being, I don't know, undermined again, you know, as to being any kind of way important as society, if you will. And maybe that's just a bit far-fetched. I don't know.
Can I just come in there to our very own Tony Lee? I think you'd mentioned something about maths. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on your questions? Medical assisted treatment there, Tony Lee, thank you. If you've got any questions and you're watching out there, get them in, get the questions in. We're gonna.
Tony's suggesting maybe Scott could do with swatting up on the new MAT guidelines.
I can tell you that, Scott.
I'm okay with that.
Lots of learning, always. Talking of learning and teachers, should we move on to Chris and take some heat off you, Ollie?
Yeah, it's fine. So I'm enjoying it.
Bombarded with the questions.
Yeah, no, lead on.
Okay, hey Chris.
Hello.
How are you doing, dude?
I'm all right, thank you. It's good to see everybody looking well. Strange times we're in. Oh, it's all gone quiet.
You're probably just buffering a little bit, Chris, but we've got you locked in. We can see and hear you fine.
How are you finding things, Chris? In the world of conditioning, in your little bunker, it looks like.
I'm in a little bunker. I'm in the loft. So apologies for the buffering on the internet. I've told everybody to turn Netflix off. That might help.
I have as well.
It's strange times. It's strange times for all of us, isn't it? And I think I love working from home usually, but this is extreme. Social contact is the thing that we all crave. We're social beings, aren't we? From a commissioning point of view, some of it's business as usual from a procedural point of view, but actually I've never, ever experienced that.
Chris, you've gone on mute.
Yeah, sorry, my laptop is sort of possessed and it does things on its own and it activates in the bottom corner on its own. I think the screen's a bit dodgy. I'll keep an eye on it. So yeah, I was just saying that it's very, very strange times for all.
The worker blames his tools, Chris.
Absolutely. It does. It drives me to distraction as well.
We was only having a coffee 3 weeks ago, and I distinctly remember it was actually about the opening the DDN, and I distinctly remember you saying, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, and things might change, and we might not have this meeting in like a week's time." And I didn't think it was serious then, you know, and it was like only a week after we was handing out the lock-on boxes and the lock-on kits and storage boxes. But you actually foreseen this coming, didn't you?
Chris?
Hey, wise man. Only because people told me.
Yeah, but you told me, but I didn't think it was this serious, you know.
Tony Lee wants to know, Chris,
yeah.
How you've dealt with housing for homeless people.
That was going to be one of the things I was going to touch on in terms of those points of legacy, really. But everything that Oliver said, and if Oliver, please do jump in if you feel the need to do so. Yeah, London, I think, has been at the fore in sorting out a lot of things, certainly around policy on this agenda. But actually, we've also been doing it locally as well. So there's loads of work going on in Lancashire. So a number of you will know my trusty colleague, Lee Harrington. So Lee's been leading on a lot of the homeless work for us and doing a sterling job, I have to say. There's a number of units been put in place in the county, like emergency units that didn't exist before. Some of that is to take people out from hospital discharges. Some of that is to get people who were rough sleeping into shelter. And that's really important. Caught it. What comes with that, of course, is a whole raft of issues that we never really had to think about before. You know, you've got to make sure that people can isolate, that they can do that safely, that people who need to be shielded can be shielded. How do we care? So there's something called COVID Protect, which is allowing those people to isolate, and then there's COVID Care for people who might come down with symptoms, and how do we isolate those people? And then we've got to make sure we can get medications into people. We've got to make sure that people can get fed, you know, but we're also exploring how do we get things like NRT or vaping equipment to people, because of course the evidence around smoking and COVID is becoming quite stark from what I've seen. So if anybody is mindful to give up smoking, there's a few comments around COPD so far, please consider stopping smoking. It's one of the best things you could do.
Now's the best
all the public health advice, of course.
Yeah. Now's the time, isn't it, Chris? I mean, now's the time more than any.
What, Chris, you know, with the government guidelines, government policy that's come out around no evictions.
Yeah.
So would that stand in supported housing?
I would hope so, and I've worked with people in your world, of course, just this last week or so to look at some of that. I've spoken to people across the country on this, as Oliver will have done as well, and it's really difficult. There's some real testing things coming out. So if you've got abstinent housing and somebody uses in it, not only are you putting the people in the abstinent housing at risk, of course, you might be putting yourself at risk. And there have been evictions related to that I'm aware of. That's a really difficult one to deal with, isn't it? Because under normal circumstances, the rules are dead clear. I think at the minute, what I'm picking up nationally, a lot of organisations are shifting to a real...
Oh, it's gone on mute again.
A real harm reduction focus. Sorry, I'll keep my hands up. It's not me, I promise. So it's getting that balance right between harm reduction, isn't it, for both the individual, and for the other people in the unit as well. So people talked earlier around people taking responsibility with prescriptions and things. Well, we've really got to reach out to everybody and really ask that people do take that responsibility and think not just about yourself, but about others and what risks you might be putting yourself or others into when you make those decisions. I know it's not easy, and it's easy for me to sit here and say it, but the last thing we want is people being evicted from units and being forced into that cycle of searching for accommodation at the minute. The pressure in the system for housing is becoming ridiculous. So many people looking for...
Oh, Christopher.
Sorry, that's not me, I promise. So yeah, we could talk about housing all evening.
I know we're just on the back of that. I know our team as well have been fielding a lot of stuff and having conversations, building relationships with providers that we wouldn't have normally spoken to. And, you know, when we're really interconnected physically, we've been doing it on the phone. So
keep doing that. Keep speaking to people. Keep trying to iron out the issues in the system.
Yeah, we are. Glenn, did you have a question? You're on mute.
There we go. You're all right, Chris. Yeah. So it was just regarding what we were speaking about earlier about the hubs that have been set up in different local areas. And I know that a lot of our guys and that have been able to go out and do things, but they want to do it under government guidelines. And what advice would you give them to be able to carry on doing that within the community?
Simply, I would say get in contact with the local hubs that are up and running in every district. So across the sort of Lancashire area, all 14 districts have got hubs in operation now. A remarkable feat if you think that 2 weeks ago these things didn't exist, and now they're there and they're up and running and they're really supporting a lot of vulnerable people in communities. It's amazing what has happened. The positive stories around this shouldn't be missed. The can-do attitude that everybody has had has been amazing. So I would say one is that I might be able to help with that because we're linked into those organisationally, and I'd really like to make sure that you guys can be a part of that. It might be that we need to might need to just work out what the channels might be. But what I would say is I've seen some of the work you've been doing, Glenn, outreach to people. I've seen it on Twitter and it's fantastic. All I would say, and I'd say this to everybody, is please, please keep following the national guidance. Maintain physical distancing. I know the term is social distancing, but I prefer to think of it as physical distancing. Please maintain that. Sorry, it's really frustrating, isn't it?
I thought you'd have had a really high-tech computer, Chris.
I think I must have broken it because it just does things on its own, as I keep saying. I'm trying to get a new one. So keep in mind, keep washing your hands regularly, take hand sanitizer out with you. You know, don't get into that 2 meter space with people. Just follow the guidance. If you follow the guidance, then, you know, your chances are you're going to be okay. But the more you're out there, the more at risk you are, of course. So where possible, stay home.
Just on community and asset-based community development, which has been a massive part of the things we do, and from a commissioning point of view, I was reading something the other day about we're in a new time, and now is the time to commission the mutual aid, you know, the mutual aid communities, the drug using communities, the recovering communities, peer-led driven stuff to get to places where, you know, people can't get to. And I'm sure that Matt can pick up on some of that when we get there. But what's your thought on commissioning? Because the landscape's completely changed, Chris, hasn't it?
It has to some degree, but you'll know that we've always taken that view anyway. We've always believed in asset-based community development being a core part of everything that we commission. We've always...
You're on mute again, Chris.
I've taken it off, sorry. I'm keeping an eye on it. We've always believed in recovery communities being central to everything that we do. And I think Lancashire's got a real legacy there, you know, 10, 12 years worth of real vibrant activity that's taken us to what this is today. Do you know what I mean? An unusual way of playing it. But this wouldn't have happened if those previous 10 years worth of hadn't gone on. What I think from a commissioning point of view, what I really, really hope will come out of this is, and it's in some of my notes around my thoughts around legacy, really, which I need to come to in a minute for you. But the whole point around valuing communities and valuing what communities can offer, what society can do, and what third sector organisations, volunteers, everybody can do. I think there's been a real shift from that over the last decade. And I don't want to get into debate around sort of austerity and things like that, but there has been a shift away from it, and money has drained out the system. And I think it's a personal view, it's not a work view. So, you know, I take my work hat off for a second if anybody's watching. Just a personal view. We've really got to embrace this way of working that we're in right now, the hubs, third sector organisations, volunteering. We've got to embrace it, and we've got to make this the norm, because actually society functions better for it.
And I think we've acted really fast, haven't we? We've reacted. You know, with the relationships we've built over the years. We couldn't have done this without building them relationships over the years. Glenn, did you have a question for Chris?
Yeah, it was just to touch on the new ways of working and the virtual platforms that are out there. And I just want to see, because obviously when we're talking about legacy, obviously I've found that there's brilliant ways of working and partnership working that's gone out. And can you see a place for this once we go back to normal and this COVID-19's not here?
Absolutely. I don't think we can ditch this. You won't do this all the time in the future. But why would you stop doing this? You've had people from New York on today. Hello, New York. That's amazing.
Yeah.
LUF would never normally reach New York. We've got a conversation next week to look at how we can build this into the future from a recovery community point of view. How can we look at investing in different ways of working to really, really make sure that we take all the positives from this and apply it to what we were doing before, so we get even better rather than just go back to business as usual. So yeah, digital platforms has got to be a massive way forward. What we've done now is it's a transformation that we've gone through. Everybody's talked digital before, and some people were using it. It's been a mass migration to digital almost overnight, and it's groundbreaking. Really, it's quite transformative, and that has to stay.
Can I just on that, and I know that he's in a real rush, and you know, bring in Mr. Matt Southwell at this point, because we did mention harm reduction, and I just want to say massive well done for the rapid response of the COVID-19 leaflet. I know you're out delivering syringes, so tell us a little bit about who you are, Matt, and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Matt Southwell. I'm the project executive of the European Network of People Who Use Drugs, or EuroNPUD, and I'm also involved in the UK drug user group called Respect Drug User Rights. And we've been working, well, from different levels. So very early on, two long-standing drug user activists, international drug user activists, Dr. Russell Newcomb and Cheryl White, they were both on lockdown because of health conditions. But from their lockdown, they rapidly came up with some guidelines about how active drug users could manage in a time of COVID-19. InPUD, our global network, picked those guidelines up and published them very quickly. So in fact, drug user networks were the first off the ground with specialist guidelines, really picking up the risks for people who are smoking, looking at the particular vulnerabilities of people who use drugs, but also looking at, we've still got HIV, hepatitis, tuberculosis, key issues that we could end up, as we saw in Glasgow, with a real change in. We could end up with a real impact in terms of harm reduction changing, like we saw in Glasgow, and then you get an HIV outbreak. So we've just been through in Bath the exact same conditions that led to the HIV outbreak in Glasgow, arrival of cocaine injecting, and potentially that happened at the same time as COVID-19, could have been an absolute catastrophe. But we have 3 secondary needle and syringe programs in Bath. We've been giving out thousands of needles and syringes in the last few weeks. So syringe numbers going out have gone up, not down, but we've hardly been able to access fixed site. We've hardly been able to access pharmacy, but we've had this fantastic collaboration going on between our local provider and between the drug user groups, really making sure that we sustain the services to active drug users.
What's a secondary syringe?
Yeah, so it's peer-to-peer. So it's either drug suppliers or people whose houses are used for using or used for meeting up places. We also actually have a mobile scheme as well. So 2 of our mobile dealers give out needles alongside selling drugs. And that's part of a community response. Now, we've had 10 people coming onto prescription in this period, and some of the suppliers have been the key way that we've got some of the most vulnerable drug users in, because they've been working with us trying to get people off the streets at this very vulnerable time. Because we were lucky, we've got probably a week or 2 ahead of London, so we're learning from London and seeing the impact on the lockdown in London. And things are going to get tough now, we need to be really thinking, what's it going to be like as drugs start to dry up? And the big issue is probably not drugs drying up, it's more people's ability to buy the drugs drying up. That's probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, and that was also the advice on one of your members' sites that I was on. He'd done a how to score in this COVID-19, which for people who use drugs, a drug using community, that practical advice, like go out during the day. Yeah. I just thought, and
it's about trying to balance it as well, Emma, because I think we want to say on one level, look, we understand that some people are going to have to go out and buy drugs, but no, go out once a day if you can, or go out twice a day. Sustain physical distancing while you're doing it. Wear masks, wash your hands. The fact that you're going to have to go out and score doesn't mean you need to abandon all of the other COVID prevention guidelines. So think, yes, we're active drug users. Yes, we're living under criminalisation. Yes, we've got to manage the police. Yes, we've got to manage the pressures on the scene right now, but we don't have to do so in a way that jeopardises our community or jeopardises the wider population. We want to have social responsibility as well as being demanding our rights as people who use drugs.
Yeah, and as a leader, Matt, you listen to and you've got followers, so you not only talking about the government guidelines, you leading by example, and that's your key message, isn't it? If you have to go out, then follow the guidelines, wash your hands.
Yeah.
And I think as well,
we've even had hand sanitizer put in at the 2 drug dealers' houses in our area where people stop and use. They're essentially informal DCRs. And one of the things we've said to people is, look, let's put notices on the wall to explain people. Initially, people felt it was hopeless. What can we do? If I'm going to get done, I'm going to get done. And we said, look, why take that view? Do you realise what it's going to be like if you get sick while you're sick? I mean, that's going to be a really tough thing to have to deal with. So get on script now to prepare. But if you can stop yourself getting infected, by all means do it. Let's have hand sanitizer in dealers' houses. Let's have practices that we keep physical distancing. We have to be pragmatic. We've dealt with HIV and hepatitis. We've dealt with much bigger viruses than this.
I was just going to say this touches on something that me and Plum was talking about the other week, which was, if you need more, ask for it. If you need more medication, ask for it and get optimal dose. You don't have to be, out there struggling on your own.
Yeah, that's important just to say that, Emma. We've had a situation where Dr. Adam Winstock, who assesses people coming into prison, he reckons the vast majority of people come into prison underdosed. So that means most people on prescription, as we know, are currently underdosed. So that means you're not going to be held if you go into lockdown for 2 weeks. So talk to your drug services now if you're using on top, if you're regularly buying methadone on top. Tell them now. If you're not on script, come back onto script now. If you don't think buprenorphine works for you, fight for methadone. There's ways of dealing with these situations. And drug services, I have to say, are responding with huge flexibility. And I'm really proud of the way British Drug Services are responding. We will be having a conversation after this about why the bloody hell could we not have this quality of service beforehand? Why have we seen treatment numbers going down? All of those issues. But drug services deserve huge commendation for the way they're stepping up. And I think let's help them respond in this time. And then let's have the conversation on the other side about why should we need to go back to daily pickups, supervised consumption, taking weeks and weeks to get into treatment, all of those things that we've been arguing against for years. Now I think the services have shown their capacity to do better.
I think it's brilliant that you have a whole network of people who generally don't really get opportunities to advocate for themselves. People advocate for them. So it's like the drug using community, people will get into recovery, then advocate for them. And you don't, they're very stigmatized as a group of people, aren't they? In terms of the opportunities they get to engage in purposeful and meaningful activities. It's generally geared up to, once you get through to a certain point in your journey, then the opportunities open up. Whereas what we know is actually the opportunities at that point in time can be the trigger for the life. I think the work you're doing is brilliant, mate, and we've collaborated on work together before, haven't we? And notice we've got Scott Parker who's put his hand up there. Scott, a question's come through for you to spell perpendicular.
Brilliant stuff. I'll look to my mentor on that one, yeah.
I'm joking. Go on, get your question in, mate.
Ask away.
So again, we're going about easier prescriptions and what have you. I mean, I can relate this back to years ago when it was just about going to a drug service, getting a prescription. How much do you want? Right, see you later. You know, and all that obviously we found out didn't work back then. And I think I'm more worried about, again, that we're doing that more so because of the crisis and everything else that's in play at this moment in time. And I totally respect that, and I totally respect the kind of work that you're doing as well. But how do we keep people on board after that? You know, do we just let them carry on running with the scripts and then drugs become easily available again? You know, how do we go about that? I mean, I mean, to press it forward, I'm asking you this question, and I'm struggling on how to, you know, how the solution on that at the end of the day. So I just thought I'd put it out there.
Look, I think you're right, Scott. I mean, we had the next series, we've just done this leaflet called COVID-19 Advice for People Who Use Drugs, which is now in 20 different languages and being pushed out in different versions around the world. We're going to do a series of videos called OST in a Time of COVID-19, and we're bringing together different OST is opiate substitution therapy, methadone and buprenorphine. It's just the UN term.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a discussion among different people on methadone and buprenorphine, diamorphine, whatever they're on. And we're going to have a discussion about, look, what is it like to be suddenly having weekly prescriptions? Now, what's it like? No, are we going to use this as a time to cut down? Are we going to keep some methadone back? How are we managing? How do we avoid using all of the drugs before the week is up? And I think some people are going to learn lessons the hard way. Other people are going to learn lessons and find themselves much more capable than they thought. And a small minority will really struggle. And I think we need to have a mature conversation, which is about giving extra support to those people who did struggle, but not persecuting the vast majority who I think will show themselves to be able to manage.
It's not about shooting your wound at the end of the day, back end of this. But I mean, that's most definitely in my forefront, you know, because people are going to try in this kind of environment and everything else. But then, you know, when they do start pulling away, just carry on plugging into them kind of people, because they're the ones that we need to reach at the end of the day, not the ones that have already got it boxed off, that are already stable, these are the kind of characters that we need to be reaching. If we can reach them now, I think it's more vital that we keep hold of them. Yeah. You know, because they might never have got into this place in the first place without this kind of crisis.
Yeah, we know the people who get knocked out by rigid treatment is not the very stable clients, it's the least stable clients. But they're the ones who can't make it through the structures. I've brought people back into treatment who've got agoraphobia, who've got physical disabilities, for whom weekly prescription is the only way they could get into services. So I think we need to really learn some lessons off the back of this, both from what didn't work, but also from, I think, the many things that did work.
Maybe legacy of COVID-19 is that we end up with a more compassionate treatment system that is fit for, you know, is geared around the people as opposed to the people having to gear around the system.
Yeah, I think it's a key moment in the dialogue, and I'm really delighted. And sorry, I'm going to have to go, but I want to really say, as an active drug user, we really appreciate the mixed economy in drug user groups around the country, from recovery groups to service user groups to active drug user groups. And I think the key is for us all to stand in solidarity, respect and recognise our differences, but stand alongside each other.
But although, Matt, I will never, ever forget, you mortified me that time when you told us we in Lancashire are the happy clappy crew.
Yeah,
I'll never give
you have a little laugh at the
I was like, really?
Just before you go, we've got a question direct for you, Matt, and it's from our very own Tony Lee. He's engaged.
He's engaged.
Shout out, Tony.
Yes.
What are your thoughts, Matt, on people who maybe run out, lose or sell their methadone, and then have to go back for another script, and then they're moved over to Subtext or Espinol or one of the...
Look, I mean, definitely, I mean, I've actually come onto methadone for the first time. Normally I'm prescribed internationally because of my work, but because I'm locked down at home, I've had to go onto a local prescription, which is something I've always tried to avoid because of the paternalistic nature of services. But no, I have to say it's been an interesting engagement to actually sit down and use the British system. And I got offered buprenorphine as a new starter quite appropriately. But then I also pointed out that it's a drug that really doesn't work for me. It doesn't help me with my anxiety. So through discussion, I was able to push and get to methadone. And I think these are the mature, rational discussions that we need to have with doctors. I mean, I've just given one of my doses for this week to two of my peers down the road who I just found in absolute withdrawals. I took videos of them as part of the evidence to be able to take to their doctor on Friday to show what they looked like before I just gave them one of my doses and what they look like, you know, somewhat comfortable after I've given them half a dose each of my methadone. We'll use that to try to talk to the doctor later on because they're trying to take people on without urine testing. But if we can show video evidence that these people were in withdrawal, then we gave them methadone, then they were less in withdrawal, then hopefully that should give them the evidence on Monday to be able to take these people into OST. So I think this is the flexibility that we're looking for. We need to advocate and support. We've got good guidance from Dr. Adam Winstock about how to bring people onto methadone without urine testing. We're happy to share that with anybody if they're stuck on that issue.
Keep sharing your stuff with us, Matt. You know we love you.
Thanks, we love you. And thank you. Look, I mean, I really respect all the work you do. You're fantastic the way you offer mutual support to each other, and you're in the progress you're making in your job.
You're in that as well, you know.
Cheers, mate.
But I like my drugs. So thank you very much. Good
luck. I know, but hey. Thanks, Matt. Andy.
So just before we jump on to you, Andy, can we just do some audience engagement? Because I know they're watching, but unless they ask questions, we can't feed them into Chris and the guys as well. So share it, like it, and comment, guys. And Lisa Crossley, we're hearing you.
Hey,
Lisa Crossley's asking some questions, and I think they're around alcohol being going to buy alcohol is it's an essential journey for her. Maybe there's ways she can do that using delivery systems. So, ordering it from your supermarkets and having it delivered. Lisa, what are your thoughts, Chris?
It's a really interesting one. I mean, first and foremost, what I'd say about all what's been said so far is that if you've got any concerns around anything relating to clinical issues around prescriptions, etc., just pick up the phone and speak to your key worker at services. Locally, services are they're going way beyond the extra mile in terms of supporting people. Yeah. So don't think twice. Pick up the phone and ring them. That's what they want you to do. They want you to engage. So yeah, they're going to be stretched, but please do that. The issue around alcohol is really... The issue around alcohol is really interesting, and it's been a topic of conversation that me and Oliver have been involved in for the last couple of weeks. There is some guidance coming out about it. I don't know quite when it's going to come out. And there are some cases I'm aware of locally. Some local authorities have even created alcohol budgets.
You've gone on.
I'm not quite sure how it's going to pan out. But if you need to get alcohol, one of the best things you could probably do is have a conversation with local treatment services and go through that assessment process with them online, over the telephone. And then you can probably get a letter off them, maybe. And I'm not trying to drop anybody into anything that's not been agreed, but it would be sensible if somebody's been through an assessment process and can clearly evidence that they're dependent on alcohol and need to go and buy alcohol, then to get a letter from services outlining that to justify your journey out, then do so. Getting online deliveries is really difficult at the minute for most people. Most of the supermarkets have got huge backlogs on that. And I'm aware through conversations with people that a lot of alcohol in the supermarkets has gone down, but I'm sure that deliveries will be coming in because there's a lot of people probably drinking more, so there's a risk to the whole population with alcohol at the minute. What last thing I'd say is that anybody who's not dependent on alcohol but worried about their drinking, there's an app from Breaking Free Online called Lower My Drinking. It's free to anybody in Lancashire at the minute, so just go onto iOS or Android, download Lower My Drinking, and get some support through that as well.
And that's Breaking Free Online.
Can I just ask a question?
Before you do, Scott, before you do, I'm just going to say to anybody out there who may be driving and think it's a good idea to then show that letter to someone that they need alcohol, they'll probably find themselves isolated, all right, but in a different sense of the word. Because I know some people might, in their desperation, think it's a good idea to get behind the wheel of a car to go and buy their alcohol, and it's like not. They're just like not good ideas at this moment in time.
And just on the back of that as well, I know that there's alcohol's a problem at the minute. I just want to put this up, and can you see that? Is that backwards?
Back a little bit. There.
So this is the domestic violence helpline.
It's backwards, so innit?
It is. So it needs to be that way.
Yeah. All the way.
Is it all right? Okay. And that is for anybody out there struggling in a domestic violence relationship, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, and you see this, it's confidential, it's free, and somebody will answer the phone. I just want to put that out there again.
Lisa, thanks you, Chris, for your advice and guidance. And just before we go on to you, Scott, thanks for being patient. Tommy White from Manchester.
Hi, Tommy.
I know you're there. Sunny Manchester, Tommy, I know you're there linking in with us. Scott.
Yeah. Chris, love you a bit. Got utmost respect for you and everything else. I'm waiting for you to become the Prime Minister. Sort the world's rights. But I was just thinking back, it's the first time I ever met you, and the first question that I ever put to you is like, are you serious around what you do and everything else? And and I love the patience and the time that you give me to sit me down and give me an honest answer as a human being. And from there, I feel like we've developed a relationship in the sense that I know what you do, you know what I do, and everything else. And I've got utmost respect for that, because I know it's the places where we've been, the commissioners that are all over the country. Is that I think we've got one in a million.
Lancashire definitely kicks it
apart. Let me just put it out there.
Kicks it apart.
My question was around. I mean, the smoke's been blown out, Paul. Sorry about this. But the question was around the housing side of it as well, so the supported housing, because there were a lot of mixed messages going on at first, and there were a lot of things getting put out there that, even the workers didn't have a clue what, information they were supposed to be receiving as to the, the safe guidelines and everything else. And it happened for a couple of weeks, but it sorted itself out, so respect to themselves. But not only that, I mean, what do you call a healthy level of engagement? I mean, because, for me, jumping through the hoops as to, the policies and everything else, and the license that you've signed, because that's all we are, is licensees. We're not tenants, so we are licensees, so we've still got to jump through hoops in a sense of maybe, testing or paying us rent, and, but the engagement side and everything else, it's basically the engagement is that we're stopping us homes and we're not going anywhere anyway. And I do feel vulnerable, towards people that are relapsing. Although, again, I'm not one for shooting the wounded, so I would help anyone, anywhere, as to the sector that I work in as well. But not only that, at home, I'm mindful around the people around me. But I do know that it's been pushed a bit now, and so the guidelines are pushed out a little bit more to try and helping people more so in this vulnerable time. Addicts being vulnerable on a whole, with their own head, with their own thinking, sticking in the same place all the time. I don't know if I've just run on too much, but
try and answer.
Relaxing. What about relaxing?
Let Chris answer the question.
So there's a few points there, and it's something you raised earlier on around vulnerability and why aren't people with drug and alcohol problems designated as vulnerable people? And Oliver gave a really good answer to say that actually people don't just fall into one box and therefore you are or you're not. People fall into many, many different sort of segments, don't they? Because life's complicated and people are complicated. But locally, we do have what's called a vulnerable people's group, and drug and alcohol use is part of that, and it's part of the work that that I'm working on at the minute. So we are recognising it as a thing in and of itself, and that it brings specific vulnerabilities. So we are doing that. The issues around treatment, again, I would always just keep reiterating the same point. Clinical issues, go and speak to people who are working clinically. I've worked clinically in the past, but I'm not working clinically now, and I'm probably way out of touch and way too rusty. Go and speak to the people who can. Go and speak to the key workers. The rules are there for reasons, and it's around keeping people safe. But the rules are written from a risk point of view. Now, what this world is showing us now is that understanding of risk has changed. It's had to change. Now, some of those things we'll need to keep going forward, and some of them we won't. So what Matt was talking about just before he went off, around having to have a proper conversation around all this and engage with people and start understanding that risk.
Oh, it's gone off again.
Understand that risk conversation at a different level. That's going to be really important. But it's far beyond my understanding, really, to sort of say what should or shouldn't happen, because we go down lines based on evidence, and everything should be evidence-based as far as possible. So it's difficult. The whole housing question is one that, when I said before around valuing communities and valuing the way that we've been working, housing's got to be part of that. Nothing operates on its own. Everything's interconnected. So if we're going to talk about drugs and alcohol, we need to be talking about housing. If we're going to be talking about housing, we need to be talking about domestic abuse. We need to be talking about employment. We need to talk about education. We need to talk about parenting. Nothing should be dealt with on its own. And I think what this crisis is showing us is that interconnectedness, and it can work, but it's also very fragile.
I find people still trying to find loops and holes as to like being a tenant or being a licensee. So if you're a tenant, you can't get kicked out. If you're a licensee, you can. You know what I'm saying? And I find that a bit vulnerable as to, as to where people are at in these kind of houses at the end of the day,
And then we're grateful, aren't we? We've got like a lot of gratitude for where we are and the conversations that are happening now, and the conversations that are, like I said before, when Oliver stated as well, and I said to Chris about conversations that we are having with housing around things like that we wouldn't have normally built connections with, we are doing. So that's a positive. Glenn, did you have a question?
Not a question. A minute. Can you hear me? Yeah, sorry. No, not a question. I just want to give a shout out to John Roberts that's in Wales, and he's said, Chris, some of the things that you have been spoke about and the help that's available is amazing. He just wishes he had it here in Wales.
I wish everybody had it. You know what? I think Lancashire's got some real positive stuff going on.
Chris, you're the driver for that. So what's the solution? Because it didn't just happen by accident, it happened by design. So if because we get this a lot, Chris, this isn't just a one-off thing that comes back. People say, why can't we have what you guys have got? And I know we've had a discussion about chronicalizing it and like giving it away, but what it needs is people like you who've got access to the corridors of power, who open the doors and identify your Scotts, your Glens, your Peter Yarwoods, your Emmas, and believe in us. That's what it needs, doesn't it, Chris?
Well, there's a lot of people who think like I do out there in roles like mine. Do you know what I mean? So I learned from other people. I'm following and, standing on other people's shoulders. Do you know what I mean? So I learn from others, and that's always got to be acknowledged. And I pick up ideas like a magpie. I'm always scavenging around from ideas. And I think I learn as much from you guys, if not more, way more than what you might learn from me.
There is a lot out there that believe that.
But actually, there are commissioners and groups that speak. And Pete, you were on the call the other day. What we're trying to do is push those boundaries now. Say it shouldn't just be commissioners speaking. It should be commissioners, providers, recovery organisations. We should all be in the same space on a level. Nobody's any more superior than anybody else. We're just all there on a level as equals, having conversations around maybe how things should be. And we held a round table at the back end of last year where we were just talking around issues of procurement, and it feels like a lifetime away now. But we were looking to have one around the drug-related deaths agenda. And of course, all this has happened, so it hasn't happened. But the meetings are happening. And Pete, you know, because you've been on the calls with Oliver as well, that it's an equal footing and everybody's got a say, and it's just around understanding how the world's unfolding. And it's so new that all we can do is learn from it and hope that we can then share that out with everybody. But when it comes to sort of like, I don't know, the Lancashire lesson, I'm convinced we should write it up. It might seem too late now, but let's do it anyway. If people want to know about it, and the rules are simple, if anybody's watching from out there, so for Wales, build up the relationships between commissioners and communities, believe in people and trust, because that's the critical thing. Once you've got trust in place, anything can happen. If you believe,
and I've got one to add to Chris. I think, you know, take risks.
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
Yeah, totally.
That was a risk.
Can I ask then, how many people in the UK, how many commissioners like yourself are there, Chris?
Well, every local authority will have somebody who leads on the drug and alcohol agenda, or every upper tier authority, depending, because Lancashire's got 12 district councils, but the drug and alcohol responsibility falls within public health and the upper tier authority, so county. So, but I think there's about 150 theoretically. What's different now than, say, 10 years ago is we used to have drug and alcohol leads, where that's what was their job. That used to be my job, drug and alcohol lead. Most of us have now got very much broader portfolios with a whole range of other topics in there. So that means you can spend less time on agendas. So across the country, there will be people who've got a great skill set in drugs and alcohol who've moved on, retired, gone on to do other things. And there are people who are very new to it. What I'm really keen to do is to make sure that we just keep sharing, learning from anywhere in the country and listening to those that don't get a voice, because that's where you pick up ideas. So that's all we can do.
Thanks, Chris.
I love your passion, Chris.
Can I just Andy Toynton from our very own Inspiring the East.
Andy's top 10 tips are coming next.
Andy's top 10 tips, yeah.
That's some background music at number 10.
he wanted some grapes and some grapes and some palm leaves in the green room.
Posh water, posh crisps.
This is a lot funny.
We're missing a couple of our guys, aren't we, Andy?
Nothing either. Didn't get nothing.
Where's Phil and Margaret?
Well, they've got invited, didn't they? I'm assuming you sent the invite.
Yes.
Yes,
so
we did.
While you're giving us your top 10 tips.
Oh, am I on now?
Yes. And to introduce yourself, what are you doing now, Andy? Well,
right, okay.
Find the guys in the community who are going to come and play us out.
Right, okay. My name's Andy Toynton. I'm the Building Recovery Coordinator in East Lancs. So some of the stuff I'm talking about today is East Lancs, but mainly it goes as far as New York as well. CGL put together advice and information that's gone out to all the service users, about COVID-19 and advice, etc. But I was asked to do some stuff on positive mental health, and also as well there was a lot of there's a lot out there: Facebook, Zoom, social media, WhatsApp groups. Not everybody's got that, so I've written these sort of top 10 tips that are going to get disseminated out there. So I'll just talk about them briefly. Before I do start, the hubs were mentioned earlier. I've had a lot of dealings with the different hubs in East Lancashire, and I know now that they're all operating all different areas in East Lancashire. Tips. The first one, I mean, a lot of this is from my personal perspective, what I've been going through as well, but also the WhatsApp group from CSI, Active Lancashire, the WhatsApp group that we've got. So it's not my, it's a sort of like people coming together and say, and I've asked people what advice, so I can't take credit for that. But the main one for me, we get a lot of information during the course of the day. And the one I did, well, I read them all, but the one I got the other day was this, I don't know if you can see it, it's not a very good picture, but I can perhaps get it out to you after. It was, the first thing was, who do I want to be during the COVID-19 pandemic? I think this came from the big book, Rachel Taylor. And it was one that jumped out at me because I thought, well, I've gone through that already. And it's got, I won't go through every aspect, but it's got sort of 3 stages it talked about. There was the stage of fear, and that includes things like, you know, when it first came across and the panic buying, and then eventually it was moving into a stage of learning and then a stage of growth. And I think we're down 3 weeks into that, and probably we're all at different points and in this sort of process, and sometimes we'll perhaps flip back into the first stage, backwards and forwards. And I just thought it was interesting to share that. So the first one that I looked at when I first started working from home, looking after the kids on side, getting a structure to your day is really important. Look, now we're 3 weeks along the line. A lot of people have probably done that, but I found it was good for my mental health that I had a focus during the course of the day. So what I did, I wrote a list of all the jobs that needed doing, and I ticked them off, and even had a time limit on them. So I felt at the end of the day, right, yeah, I've done, you know, I've achieved that. And I think having that structure is really, really important. It doesn't matter, it's all personal, isn't it, what your structure is. If you know where I'm coming from on that. The next one was keeping the mind active. Yeah. What's that old phrase? The devil makes work for idle hands. Yeah, we've got, a lot of us have got extra time on our hands now. And the mind's great at filling it up when it's like, you know, filling it full of sort of negative thoughts and positive thoughts. And I think keeping active mentally is really good, something that we should take on board. And it doesn't matter, it's whatever, you know, sort of is the needs for that person. And so I just go in, what I was going to talk about the negative thoughts was, very quickly they can come, and they sort of like act very quickly, and before you know it, there's a negative behavior that comes out of it. It's about recognizing that. It's about putting that invisible stop sign up and keeping active, and not sort of like going over and over it, because we are all in the same boat here. Yeah, I mean, it's a good level of this for a start, and it's not going to be forever as well. So I think that trying to keep that in the mind, that at some point,
Andy, are we in the same boat? And is it a level up? I'm not sure.
In some respects, right, okay, all right. I wasn't well when I thought about this afternoon, right? It's I didn't really want to get dragged into sort of like political. In some respects, it is it's affecting the whole country. However, there are more disadvantages in that sense. But I wouldn't. So yeah, I'm contradicting myself now, Peter. But
sorry,
you know,
all right, Andy.
Yeah, but it is. I don't think we've ever experienced something like this that has hit across the nation. It doesn't discriminate in terms of health, does it? But how we deal with that, some of it, you know, what facilities people have, that is different. If somebody's got, like, you know, the safety of a home, or people who've got that can afford the food, and that is not a leveler in that sense, but it doesn't discriminate in terms of the actual disease itself.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, myself out.
You're doing well, Andy.
Thank you. Right, I think we're on number 3 or 4 now. Oh, hang on, I've lost it.
Well, you're just on number 3. Can I just give a shout out to Phil Dalton, wherever you are? You're meant to be playing us out.
Has he accepted the invitation?
I've sent Phil and Margaret another email.
Right, and I've spoke to them today as well, so they knew, and I thought they'd be getting an email. So
I love they're watching. They need to be coming on pretty soon. Go on,
I'm not picking my guitar up. You didn't want me to the other day. Going on to the next one as well. It's about accepting the situation as well. That's a difficult one to get your head around. Yeah, accepting it. It's like it's not going away anytime soon, but it will go away. And I think sometimes we have a resistance. Human beings, okay, change, especially when you're my age. We are resistant to change sometimes. And I think it'll free you up a bit to sort of accept that, yes, this has happened. What can I do? What control things can I put in place? You know, if you're struggling, the Inspire out there doing a fantastic job. The key workers, they're available for them. You know, I see people at the end of the week on Zoom meetings, and they're like absolutely shattered. So you're not on your own though. You're not isolated. You know, and there's Red Rose, there's Active Lancashire, everybody's out there, and it's amazing me how quickly forces have come together, you know, and I think it'll be different afterwards. It has to be. It absolutely has to be. I don't think, you know, I've started reassessing now the way I work. So accepting. My next tip, come on, let me go on my next tip. Right, don't overload on the news, right? Yeah. What's the news? The relevance of it, but it's on. If you put the radio on, it's 24/7, and I think that does have a massive impact on your mental health.
See myself.
Oh, hang on, who's that? Oh, hello, Margaret. Hiya, Margaret's here.
Don't have to sort my technical bit out.
Just mute yourself, Margaret, for a minute.
I'm no good with knobs and buttons.
It's all right, love. Glad you're here. Mute yourself.
Yeah. Don't go over the top with the news. I have a tendency to try to watch it in the morning and then try and leave it alone until 5 o'clock, because otherwise it's once you're aware of what's going on, it doesn't serve any purpose watching it over and over again, and it does, perhaps unconsciously as well, it can drag you down. You know, do what you can do for everybody else in the community, you know, and do what you can do to keep yourself safe and doing the social distancing. But too much news, it's not a good thing necessarily. Number 5 was exercise. Pretty self-explanatory. I've seen some of Pete in his backyard doing his exercise.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah. Do have to shout out to the CrossFit 180 crew. They've got it going on there up in Clitheroe. You was doing some shuffles.
Yeah, what happens at CrossFit stays at CrossFit.
I think it's hard sometimes to get into creating a positive habit of doing exercise. I used to go to the gym every day, and I've had to force myself. So creating positive habits is one of the new that's one of the tips there. Exercises including use the sort of like the half an hour or an hour, I'm not too sure, of getting out, because sometimes you can get in the habit of not doing something. Yeah, you know, and I say that personally, right, I need to get out, I need to do the walk, you know, and add that variety to it. We're moving along.
Andy, the CSI, you're doing some stuff as well.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I had an interview here. They have their online, yeah, absolutely fantastic. They go on their Facebook, and they're doing their WhatsApp group they've got as well. And they've got a full timetable. I know Dave B, Kirsty, Jane Moody, and everybody there will be kind of fantastic. Yeah. I'll just flip through the last few. They're all mixed in together. The other thing is like, be kind to yourself, relax. Yeah. Okay. Have something to look forward to at the end of the day. Don't give yourself a hard time. You know, you can sort of like go in them negative thoughts and say, well, you know, there is actually no point in doing that. I know it's all right for me to say that, but try and relax. You know, there's plenty of stuff out there on mindfulness. You don't need YouTube clips and that. You can do it yourself. It's about you learning a new skill as well. Sitting there for 2 minutes with music, because your mind will straight away go off on a different tangent, and it's about pulling it back, let it flow, and then bring it back. You know, it's a good opportunity to sort of move on to the next ones where, you know, learn new hobbies, learn new skills, and I think catch up on sleep, that down, plenty of reading.
Housework.
Sorry?
Housework.
Oh God, yeah, integrated housework. You burn so many calories off doing the hoovering. Yeah, you don't realise. I'm always up, you know, cleaning up housework. Yeah, integrated exercise. Set your target for 20,000 steps a day. And sorry, my hamster's just popped his head out. So it's distracting me. Yeah, so that's about it, really. Is that all right?
Andy, yeah, that's brilliant. Are you back out in the food banks next week then?
Right, no, I'm not on. I was working with I was trying to get other food banks. That what was happening was they were working sort of independently, and all I was doing was I was working from home, is getting referrals out. But now the hubs are in.
Yes.
Just one phone call, which is brilliant. So they've out there, they've got them all together. No, I'm back out to work next week doing something else. So, but I'm still there in the community.
Helping on the front line.
Yeah, and well, I haven't been yet, but I will be next Thursday and Friday, because my wife works for the hospital, so she's not being able to be freed up, but she's going to get a couple of days.
Should we just give everyone a clap who works on the front line anyway? Come on.
So, have you got Phil yet?
Phil's in the house. Yes, we've just landed. So I just want to absolutely say I love these guys so much. They're out in the community. They've zoomed in from home, How are you feeling, Phil? Come off mute, love.
Got it. Yes. Are you all right?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, I've known Phil many, many, many years, haven't I, love? Many years.
Yeah.
It's so nice to see you, and I'm glad you're alive.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad you're
Well,
alive.
it was close for a bit.
You was, and we lost a good few on the way, didn't we, mate?
Yeah.
And we love them, and this is for them as well. So get your guitar and let's see your skills.
Right.
And while you're doing that, can I just shout out to Peter Sheaf?
Peter
We love
Sheaf,
you,
we
Peter
love
Sheaf.
you, man.
You're awesome. And Scully's in my ear. What
You do realise, though, if you turn the laptop round.
I'm all right, am I?
I thought you said you'd.
Oh. So this is a song, one of my favourite songs, Waterfall by Storm Roses. So, yeah. So I'll play it for you.
Yeah, play with all your heart, Phil, because you're amazing.
I will, yeah.
Go for it.
She's a waterfall. See the sleeple pine.
Let's hear you, Phil.
As old as time, soon to be put to the test, to be whipped by the winds of the west. She'll carry on through it all. She's a waterfall.
Well, Phil.
Well done, Phil. That was
man.
amazing.
Oh, thank you.
You just done so well there compared
Thanks,
to the
Phil.
other day. Thank you, love. And Margaret, where are you, Margaret? Take yourself off mute.
Oh, what does it say? Oh, what does it say? Let me get a button.
We can hear you. Oh, you put yourself back on now.
Take yourself off mute.
You can take her off mute as the host.
Oh, is that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can hear you now, yes.
Can you hear me now, Mother?
Right, Margaret, let me hear you, girl. Let me hear you.
Okay, this is a little poem I made for the times that we're in. And here we go. I'll get the
With
glasses
passion,
up.
darling, with
With
passion.
I'll turn my fan off. There we go. You might hear me better now. All right, here we go. With passion. The staircase to recovery has many turns and twists. The steps are pretty dangerous. There are demons to resist. While the journey takes a lifetime, there are pitfalls on the way. That social isolation where you never have your say. Alone with many triggers, alone with your mental health, alone with all your feelings, with so many notches on your belt. And now a different enemy threatens our recovery, a virus that's so deadly, it frightens you and me. Away from all our support systems, away from family and friends, this social isolation can drive the sane of us round the bend. The 12 steps of recovery are the toolkit we can use when doubts of our ability brings thoughts of more abuse. Keep on that staircase of recovery. You're not as isolated as you think. You still have red rose and recovery. Don't you dare give up and sink. So this isolating period, see this social distancing we have to do. See this as another step on the staircase to a strong, recovered you. These are very tragic, scary times. Thousands are infected across the world. So many of our family and friends, every man, woman and girl. We all have to take responsibility to stay in, stay home, be strong. This is yet another step on your recovery. What we are facing is so wrong. A silent, deadly virus that could easily be an excuse to give up on your recovery so you have a reason to start to use. But see this time of isolation, see it as enlightening your cause. Dig deep into your store of courage. You can do this. It's because we each have a part to play in stopping this virus from spreading. And if you can focus on your recovery, you will see where the future's heading. We all have to limit our interactions, but yet it's the greatest time to reach out as we use the technical contraptions, as we pick up our masks and gloves and shout. We won't let this virus beat us when we have all fought so many wars. And when all this is over, it's our victory cry we'll call. Stay strong in your social isolation. Take stock and lean on all your friends. This virus won't get the better of us. This is not the way it ends.
Oh,
Well
thank you
done.
so much. Thank you so much.
Hi
Thank
to Phil,
you.
housemate there. Oh, thank you, Margaret. I'm so glad you both managed to get in at the
Oh,
end.
yeah.
We love
Well done,
you.
Margaret. Smashed it.
Thank
you,
You
sweetheart.
totally smashed it. You did. Thank you
my
so much
darling.
for sharing that with us. It was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
We've
Keep strong and keep safe, everybody.
Yeah.
bless you.
And
Bless
you,
you.
Margaret, and you, Phil.
Yeah.
So Glenn's gonna speak us out now, aren't you, Glenn? And you can thank the viewers, but I just want to thank the guests tonight from the bottom of our heart. Chris,
Absolutely. Thank you.
Andy, Oliver, Matt, you know, all the guys who've come on, give their Saturday evening over an Easter
Yeah,
weekend
yeah.
to be a part of something new and something good and true and beautiful. In that sense, we are all in it together, Andy. So, honest to God, guys, thank you so much. My message to anybody and everybody watching: stay safe, stay blessed, and stay connected to the best of your ability. So Glenn's going to drop some wisdom into our world now, aren't you, Glen Island?
Just on the back of that,
Am I?
staying connected. The Wells got some virtual hubs going in Clayton Brook on Tuesday, 1 till 2, Wadall in Leyland. Shout out to Leyland. Tuesday, 2:30 till 3:30, Lancaster 2 till 3, Saturday, and Fleetwood's coming soon. We're always just on the end of the phone all the time. You don't have to be alone, so you can stay connected. Sorry, Glenn.
No, it's all right. No, I just want to thank the viewers and also our guests. I think it's a great platform. It's just like a Lancashire User Forum and a venue, but on a platform like this, but it reaches the wider community. So what I would say is every Saturday at 5 o'clock, come in, get your questions in, the guests can answer it. And yeah, thanks for coming, and also thank yous for Scott Parker and people behind the scenes that are scanning the messages on the live Facebook page, because they put a lot of hard work in as well. And I just want to say as well, I know that Gareth and Alison in the east and the north, we've had to find a different way of working. It's absolutely been brilliant and sharing best practice, so that everybody that's watching, if you can get our numbers or email addresses to you, to us, then what we're doing WhatsApp groups, Zoom groups online, and we're actually reaching a wider audience than potentially we are in buildings, because people that are vulnerable and that can't get out to groups, stuff like that. And that's why I asked the question before with Chris. Once this COVID-19 is gone, I think it's a brilliant way of working to incorporate it into what we already do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, God, I was in California last night, weren't I? In the meeting, California.
Yep. So yeah.
Thank you. Any last thoughts before we wind it up, guys? Or are we happy to tune in next week?
Yeah. Thank you. I love you. Be safe.
I love you. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
See you later. Bye.
Cheers. See you, Glenn. See you, Margaret. See you, Phil. Well done.